You know, when you're covering diplomatic events across the galaxy, you think you've seen everything. Trade disputes between the Centaurian Collective and the Vegan Commerce Guild. Territorial negotiations involving three-dimensional space that would make your head spin. Cultural exchange programs that somehow always end with someone being accidentally insulted by improper tentacle positioning. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the night Ambassador Maya Rodriguez walked into the Serenity's Crown Gala. The Serenity's Crown is basically the Ritz-Carlton of space stations. If the Ritz-Carlton floated in the void between star systems and charged you extra for artificial gravity. It's where the galaxy's elite come to see and be seen, to make deals that shape interstellar policy, and to consume beverages that cost more than most planets' annual GDP. Tonight's gala was supposed to be a celebration of the new trade concordat between the core worlds. Black tie optional, formal diplomatic immunity required. The guest list read like a who's who of galactic society. The Altarian Chancellor with his elegant feathered crest, Trade Minister Quilana from the Silicon Confederacy, her metallic skin gleaming under the station's ambient lighting. Even the notoriously reclusive Ethereal Council had sent a representative, though nobody could actually see them without special optical equipment. And then there was Maya Rodriguez, human, age 24, daughter of Earth's newly appointed trade attaché, the only member of her species within 1,000 light years. See, here's the thing about humans that most civilized species don't really grasp. In galactic taxonomy, they're classified as what we politely call deathworlders. Their planet, Earth, is basically a nightmare realm where everything is trying to kill everything else. Massive predators, toxic atmosphere mixtures, gravitational forces that would crush most civilized beings, and weather patterns that regularly produce natural disasters just for fun. Most species evolve on nice, peaceful worlds where the biggest concern is whether the local flora might give you a mild rash. Humans evolved on a planet where the flora actively tries to murder you, the fauna considers you a light snack, and the weather systems are powered by the kind of thermal dynamics that make physicists weep. So when Maya walked through those doors, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost less than the average alien ceremonial hat, you could literally feel the room's collective anxiety spike. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Several delegates actually took a step backward. I'm pretty sure I saw the Ethereal Council representative briefly become visible just from sheer surprise. Maya, for her part, seemed completely oblivious to the effect she was having. She checked her small handbag at the coach station, accepted a glass of something fizzy from a passing service drone, and began making polite conversation with whoever was brave enough to make eye contact. Which, as it turned out, was a terrible mistake for everyone involved. Now, I've covered enough diplomatic functions to recognize the signs of impending disaster. The nervous chittering of the insectoid delegates, the way the gaseous life forms start swirling faster in their containment suits, the sudden uptick in security drones circling the room like metallic vultures. But Maya seemed genuinely determined to fit in. She made small talk about interstellar shipping regulations with a group of trade officials. She complimented the Altarian Chancellor's plumage, which actually made him preen visibly. She even managed to avoid the cultural landmine of accidentally insulting the vegan delegation by asking about their plant-based lifestyle. These are the small victories that make diplomatic careers. Unfortunately, not everyone was quite so welcoming. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystal Hegemony had been holding court near the main viewport, regaling anyone with an earshot with tales of his species' cultural superiority. The Crystal Hegemony, you see, considers itself the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They evolved from silicon-based life forms on a world where conflict was resolved through elaborate philosophical debates rather than physical confrontation. Violence, to them, is not just barbaric but literally incomprehensible. Veltar himself stood nearly 8 feet tall, his crystalline body refracting the station's lights into prismatic rainbows. When he spoke, his voice resonated like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Very elegant, very refined, very convinced of his own intellectual superiority. The problem with these newer species, he was saying to his audience of admirers, is their complete lack of proper evolutionary development. They solve problems with brute force rather than enlightened discourse. A few delegates nodded in agreement. The ethereal council representative made what I assumed was a sound of approval, though it might have been a sneeze. Take the humans, for instance, Veltar continued, his prismatic eyes somehow managing to find Maya across the room. Deathworlders, they call them. As if surviving on a hostile planet is something to be proud of, rather than evidence of poor planetary management. Maya, who had been examining some of the local artwork near the wall, turned slightly. Not enough to seem like she was eavesdropping, but just enough to let everyone know she'd heard every word. I mean, really? Veltar's voice carried beautifully across the now quiet room. What kind of civilized being solves problems by hitting things? Their entire history is just one long catalog of violence and aggression. Wars, conquests. Something they call sports where they deliberately injure each other for entertainment. Maya took a sip of her drink. Her expression remained perfectly neutral. And now they want to join civilized society, Veltar continued, warming to his theme. As if we should welcome creatures who are barely one step removed from the beasts they evolved alongside. I've read their cultural files. They actually celebrate individuals who excel at violence. They call them heroes. The crowd was getting uncomfortable now. Even by diplomatic standards, this was pushing the boundaries of acceptable discourse. But Veltar was on a roll. Honestly, I'm not sure why we even allow them at civilized gatherings. It's like inviting a pack of wild animals to a philosophy symposium. Maya set down her glass. She turned toward Veltar with what I can only describe as professional interest. "Excuse me, Ambassador," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. "Did you have a question about human culture, or were you just sharing your personal theories with the group?" And that's when I realized we were all in serious trouble. Here's something about humans that the rest of the galaxy consistently underestimates: their capacity for remaining calm under pressure. Most civilized species, when insulted publicly, respond with elaborate displays of outrage or formal challenges to philosophical debates. Humans just smile and ask clarifying questions. Maya's smile was particularly unsettling. Veltar, apparently mistaking her calm demeanor for weakness, decided to double down on his approach. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of troubling you with complex philosophical concepts," he said, his crystalline form catching the light as he moved closer. "I was simply explaining to my colleagues why certain species might not be ready for true civilization." "I see," Maya said. "And what specific aspects of human behavior led you to this conclusion?" "Where would one even begin?" Veltar spread his arms in an elaborate gesture that caused light to scatter across the ceiling. "The aggression, the territorial behavior, the complete inability to resolve conflicts through peaceful discourse." "Interesting," Maya replied. "And you base this assessment on personal experience with humans or on theoretical frameworks?" Now, if Veltar had been paying attention to Maya's tone, he might have noticed that she sounded like a professor preparing to deliver a very educational lecture. Instead, he heard what he wanted to hear: deference to his superior intellect. "Theoretical frameworks, naturally," he said. "One hardly needs direct experience with primitive behavior to recognize it." "Naturally," Maya agreed. "Though I do wonder about the accuracy of theoretical models when they haven't been tested against real data." The crowd was starting to sense the shift in dynamics. Several delegates had begun edging toward the exits. Security drones were positioning themselves with the kind of casual alertness that suggested someone had just upgraded the evening from routine diplomatic function to potential incident requiring paperwork. But Veltar was having too much fun to notice. "My dear child," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "some things are simply self-evident. Your species' reputation speaks for itself." "Does it?" Maya asked. "And what exactly does our reputation say?" "That humans are violent, unpredictable, and fundamentally unsuited for civilized company." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That's quite a comprehensive assessment. Tell me, Ambassador, what would you do if you encountered behavior that contradicted this theoretical framework?" "I suppose I would be forced to revise my position," Veltar said magnanimously. "Though I rather doubt that scenario will arise." "Well," Maya said. Let's find out. That's when Veltar made his crucial error in judgment. Perhaps he thought Maya was challenging him to some sort of formal debate. Perhaps he wanted to demonstrate his physical superiority to match his intellectual dominance. Perhaps he was just monumentally stupid. Whatever his reasoning, he reached out with one crystalline appendage and wrapped it around Maya's throat. Not aggressively, you understand. More like a parent disciplining a child. Just enough pressure to establish dominance without causing actual harm. The kind of gesture that, among his own species, would have immediately ended the conversation with his opponent acknowledging defeat. Maya looked down at his hand. Then she looked back up at his face. And then she smiled. I've seen a lot of smiles in my years covering diplomatic events. Polite smiles, diplomatic smiles, the kind of forced social smiles that barely hide murderous intent. But Maya's smile was something else entirely. It was the smile of someone who had just been given exactly what they were hoping for. It was the smile of an apex predator whose prey had just walked into its territory. "Ambassador," she said conversationally, "are you quite finished with your demonstration?" And that's when the temperature in the room seemed to drop about 20 degrees. Part 4, Deathworld Biology 101. "You know," Maya said, still speaking in that perfectly pleasant, conversational tone while Veltar's crystalline fingers remained wrapped around her throat, "this is actually a perfect opportunity to address some of those theoretical misconceptions you mentioned." Veltar was starting to look less confident. I think he was beginning to realize that his gesture of dominance wasn't having the expected effect. Most civilized beings would have immediately submitted to his superior reach and strength. Maya was just standing there like she was waiting for him to finish tying her shoes. "Take this current situation, for example," she continued. "You're operating under the assumption that physical intimidation will cause me to defer to your authority. It's a reasonable hypothesis, based on how most species respond to displays of superior physical capability." The crowd was backing away now. Not running, because that would be undignified, but definitely creating what military strategists call tactical distance. Even the service drones seemed to be giving the pair a wider berth. "The problem with your approach," Maya went on, "is that it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. You see, humans didn't evolve on a world where physical confrontation was rare and philosophically complex. We evolved on a world where everything was actively trying to kill us, all the time, for millions of years." Veltar's grip tightened slightly. I could see him putting more pressure on Maya's throat, expecting her to gasp or struggle, or show some sign of distress. Maya just kept talking. "This had some interesting evolutionary consequences," she said. "For instance, humans developed something called persistence hunting. We're not the fastest predators on our planet, or the strongest, or the most immediately dangerous. But we have this fascinating ability to just keep going. We can track prey across entire continents, running them down over days or weeks until they literally collapse from exhaustion." I was starting to understand why several senior diplomats had suddenly remembered urgent business elsewhere. "We also developed some interesting neurochemical responses to stress," Maya continued, her voice as steady as if she were delivering a lecture at university. "When threatened, human brains flood the system with chemicals like adrenaline and noradrenaline. Heart rate increases, pain sensitivity decreases, muscle efficiency improves. It's really quite remarkable." Veltar was definitely applying pressure now. I could see the crystalline ridges of his fingers digging into the sides of Maya's neck. Any civilized being would have been gasping, pleading, or at minimum showing some sign of oxygen deprivation. Maya just smiled wider. "But perhaps the most interesting adaptation," she said, "is our response to being grabbed by the throat." That's when I noticed that Maya's pupils had dilated. Her breathing had become deeper and more controlled. Her posture had shifted in some subtle way that made her look less like a young diplomat and more like something that belonged on a nature documentary about apex predators. "You see, Ambassador, on Earth, when something grabs you by the throat, it means one very simple thing: it's trying to kill you. And when something tries to kill a human, our brains interpret that as permission to use any and all methods necessary to ensure our continued survival. Veltar was really putting effort into his grip now. His crystalline fingers were glowing with internal light as he applied what would have been crushing force to any member of his own species. Maya looked like she was enjoying a pleasant conversation at a cocktail party. The fascinating thing about human bone and muscle structure, she went on, is how it's designed to handle sudden impacts and extreme stress. Our necks, in particular, are ridiculously over-engineered. They have to support heads that are much larger relative to our body size than most species. And they need to remain functional, even when we're moving at high speeds or changing direction rapidly. I think that's when Veltar finally realized he might have made a tactical error. So while I certainly appreciate the educational value of your demonstration, Maya said, reaching up to gently pat the crystalline hand around her throat, that I should probably mention that you're currently engaged in what humans would classify as potentially lethal assault. The silence in the room was so complete I could hear the station's life support systems humming in the background. And we have some very specific behavioral protocols for dealing with potentially lethal assault. Maya's smile had taken on what I can only describe as educational enthusiasm. Would you like me to demonstrate? Before we proceed, Maya said, still speaking in that perfectly reasonable tone, I should probably mention that humans have something called proportional response doctrine. It means we generally try to use only as much force as necessary to neutralize a threat. Veltar was now putting his full strength into his grip. His crystalline body was practically glowing with effort. Maya looked like she was having the time of her life. The challenge, of course, is determining exactly how much force is necessary. She tilted her head thoughtfully, which couldn't have been easy with a crystal hand wrapped around her throat. I mean, you're clearly attempting to cause physical harm, possibly even death. But you're not actually succeeding, which suggests either inadequate force application or fundamental misunderstanding of human physiology. That's when I realized Maya wasn't just delivering a lecture. She was providing commentary for what was about to become a very educational demonstration. Ambassador, I'm going to ask you nicely to let go of my throat, she said. This is your opportunity to de-escalate the situation before it becomes a learning experience for everyone involved. Veltar's response was to try even harder to crush her windpipe. Big mistake. Right then, Maya said cheerfully. Deathworld biology, practical application. What happened next took approximately 3 seconds and would probably require 17 different camera angles to fully appreciate. Maya reached up, wrapped her fingers around Veltar's wrist and simply twisted. Not violently, not dramatically, just a smooth, economical rotation that somehow caused 8 feet of crystalline alien to flip completely upside down and crash into the deck plating hard enough to crack the reinforced flooring. Lesson 1, Maya announced to the room, stepping delicately over Veltar's now twitching form. Human joints can rotate in directions that most species find anatomically impossible. It's called hypermobility, and it's very useful for escaping grapples. Veltar's security detail, apparently deciding this had gone from diplomatic incident to active threat scenario, began moving toward Maya with what I'm sure they thought was intimidating coordination. Oh good, Maya said, noticing their approach. I was hoping we'd get to cover pack hunting behavior. Security drone number 1, a sleek Altarian combat model, reached Maya first. She ducked under its reaching appendages, grabbed something that looked important from its undercarriage, and used the drone's own momentum to send it crashing into a nearby refreshment table. Lesson 2, she called out while dodging the second drone. Humans are excellent at using environmental factors to their advantage. We call it tool use, though technically anything can be a tool if you're creative enough. She demonstrated this by picking up a decorative sculpture from the destroyed refreshment table and using it to club the second security drone into a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Lesson 3, Maya continued, now facing off against 3 more approaching security personnel. Humans are really good at pattern recognition. We can predict your movements, anticipate your strategies, and adapt our responses in real time. She proceeded to demonstrate this by systematically dismantling the remaining security team with a combination of martial arts techniques, improvised weapons, and what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm for the educational process. And lesson 4, she said, standing over the pile of groaning, sparking, and generally defeated alien security forces, but humans actually get better at fighting when we're outnumbered. It's called pack hunting instinct, and it's why we conquered our planet's food chain. The remaining gala attendees had pressed themselves against the far walls of the reception hall. Several were making urgent calls on their communication devices. I'm pretty sure I saw the ethereal council representative attempting to phase through solid matter to escape. Maya brushed some crystalline dust off her dress and looked around the room. Any questions? The aftermath of Maya's impromptu educational seminar was, in a word, spectacular. Station security arrived approximately 4 minutes after the demonstration concluded, which was actually impressive response time considering they had to process several dozen simultaneous emergency calls in 17 different languages, 3 of which don't technically use sound. They found Maya standing calmly beside the refreshment table, examining the selection of canopies while stepping delicately around the various groaning alien life forms scattered across the reception hall floor. She had somehow managed to locate the vegetarian options and was making small talk with a terrified service drone about the dietary restrictions of different species. "Mayam," the security chief said, his voice carrying the carefully neutral tone of someone who has just walked into a situation that's going to require a lot of paperwork. "We're going to need you to explain what happened here." Maya swallowed a bite of what appeared to be some kind of exotic space cheese and smiled pleasantly. "Certainly, officer." Ambassador Veltar initiated an unprovoked physical assault by attempting to strangle me. When I requested that he stop, he refused and escalated the violence. His security personnel then joined the attack. I responded with appropriate defensive measures. The security chief looked around the room. Veltar was still lying on the floor, making crystalline whimpering sounds and occasionally twitching. His security team was scattered around the reception hall, in various states of mechanical failure and existential regret. The decorative sculpture Maya had used as an improvised weapon was now embedded halfway through a reinforced wall panel. "This was self-defense?" he asked. "Cultural exchange," Maya corrected. Ambassador Veltar expressed some theoretical concerns about human behavior. I provided practical demonstrations to help clarify any misconceptions. "And the property damage?" Maya glanced around the room, taking in the cracked flooring, destroyed furniture, embedded artwork, and general devastation. "Educational overhead," she said cheerfully. "You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs." I have to admire the security chief's professionalism. He managed to complete his incident report without once asking Maya to define what an omelet was, or why its creation required the destruction of eggs. The diplomatic fallout, of course, was immediate and extensive. The Crystal Hegemony filed 17 separate formal complaints with the Galactic Council, demanding everything from Maya's immediate arrest to humanity's expulsion from civilized space. The trade negotiations were suspended pending a full investigation. 3 different species requested additional security escorts for any future events involving humans. And Maya? She finished her canopies, complimented the catering staff on their excellent work, and calmly waited for station security to complete their interviews. The final incident report, which I had the privilege of reviewing before publication, concluded that Maya Rodriguez had acted within acceptable parameters of self-defense, had shown remarkable restraint considering the severity of the attack, and had provided valuable educational content regarding human capabilities that would undoubtedly prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. They also recommended that future diplomatic functions include mandatory briefings on Deathworlder biology and suggested that physical contact with humans be limited to handshakes and other clearly non-threatening gestures. As for Veltar, his political career effectively ended the moment he grabbed Maya's throat. It's hard to maintain credibility as a sophisticated diplomat when security footage shows you getting systematically dismantled by someone half your size, who was providing educational commentary throughout the process. Maya collected her handbag from the coat check, thanked the station staff for a lovely evening, and headed for the docking bay where her transport was waiting. Just before she left, she turned back to address the handful of delegates who were still conscious and coherent enough to pay attention. "If anyone else would like to discuss human limitations," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the damaged reception hall, "I'm always available for educational consultations." The exodus that followed was so rapid it probably set new records for diplomatic evacuation procedures. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how one small human woman single-handedly revolutionized interspecies relations, ended a promising political career, and created the galactic requirement for mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Maya Rodriguez, diplomat's daughter, educational enthusiast, and living proof that sometimes the best way to win hearts and minds is to demonstrate exactly why you shouldn't grab a Deathworlder by the throat. Class dismissed.